I'm going on vacation to Peru in about a month, going mainly to Machu Picchu, but to other destinations. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be a little unusual for me because I'm actually going with a group, with a prepackaged tour group that happens to be a gay tour group, which I've never done anything like that. I've pretty much been a solo traveler. I bought the tickets quite a while ago, and I've been having just a string of adventures with the airline, Rant, which is the Peruvian airline. They keep changing the itinerary. First I had a non-stop flight from JFK to Lima. They canceled that. Now I have to fly through Miami and I have to change airlines. And the most recent change, they've tweaked the times here and there, no big deal. But this time I got an email from them saying that the first leg of my return trip had been canceled. And they put me on, it was a short domestic flight from the Peruvian city of Cusco to Lima. And I have this as two different itineraries. The New York to Lima round trip is one itinerary, and then there's just this one-way flight from Cusco to Lima as a separate itinerary. So I can't fault them for not realizing that I had a connection even though it was with their own airline. But they put me on a later flight that really was cutting it far too close. So I go on their website and I see what my other options are in terms of maybe taking an earlier flight. And I find out that there is still a flight leaving Cusco to go to Lima at the exact same time. And it's the exact same plane. They just changed the flight number. They just went from flight X to flight Y. And I think, why can't they just put me on flight Y, which is really flight X to begin with, and they just changed the numbers? So I called Rant and I explained to them, you canceled my flight, and yet you still have an exact same flight with the exact same departure time. Well, no, sir, your flight was canceled. It's like, I appreciate that my flight was canceled. I got the email, that's why I'm calling you. Can you put me back on the earlier flight that I was originally on? Well, no, sir, that flight was canceled. You have a flight leaving at the exact same time. It's the exact same plane. You're just calling it flight Y instead of flight X. All I'm asking is to get me off of flight Z that you put me on, that's 2 hours later, and put me on flight leaving at such and such a time. I don't care whether you call it flight Y or flight X or flight Zoop. Just please put me on that flight. And they eventually accommodated me. I was able eventually to explain to them what I wanted. What I don't understand is, why would this not be automatic? If you have to change your schedules, and I appreciate that airlines have to change their schedules to some extent, but if you're going to cancel somebody's flight and you have many flights that do point A to point B, wouldn't you program your systems, because this is all done by computer, couldn't you program your systems to say, okay, whatever flight is the closest? Don't just summarily assume that 2 hours later is perfectly fine. I had an early flight, they pushed me 2 hours later, there was a flight 1 hour later. If you can't even get it right to say, okay, it's the same flight, we'll keep them on the same flight just with a different flight number, at least put me on the next possible flight. If it's a little bit earlier, if it's a little bit later, minimize, for your own sake, minimize the probability that somebody is going to call you and say, excuse me, this doesn't work. A major airline in the United States, as bad as they can be sometimes, I've blogged about this, would not do that. They would put you roughly on the same, they'd certainly put you on the same flight with a different flight number, and if they were going to move you, they'd make some effort to put you reasonably close. That's been my experience. So, Rant, get with the program and get some decent computer programmers. I should mention, by the way, that when they canceled my non-stop flight from JFK to Peru, they actually, rather than giving me a new itinerary, they put me on a flight the day before, as if, what's the difference between traveling on a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Friday? At least, give me the same day. Tell me your horror stories. What kind of flight changes that have been completely outrageous? Randomly seeing that your itinerary has changed in some bizarre, incomprehensible way, and then you've had to try to get it changed. That's it. Cheers.